Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Swati Mishra from International School of Business Management at Suresh Gyan Vihar University. And I am here with yet another session of Indian business houses. And in today's session, we are going to discuss the business environment. Yes, the environment which surrounds our business entity, something which is very important for the Indian business houses to grow, and something very important for us to understand as to which kind of environment is actually surrounding the Indian business houses. So, the learning objectives of this session are to understand the importance of business environment, to have a detailed understanding of the components of business environment and how they impact the business, to get an insight to the supporting and restricting environmental factors for the Indian business houses. Let's have a look at the learning outcomes of this session. After this session, you will carry an understanding of the importance of business environment, a detailed understanding of the components of business environment and how they impact the business, and insight to the supporting and restricting environmental factors for the Indian business houses. So let's begin with the session. I want to start with a little case for this session, which I found very suitable. The soft drinks giants PepsiCo and Coca-Cola suffered a decline in sales of colas in India in the beginning of the year 2006. After an environmental group, Center for Science and Environment CSE, claimed to have found pesticides in their drinks up to 50 times the permissible health limits. These companies issued a number of press statements and conducted many publicity campaigns in India, claiming that their beverages were perfectly safe. The Union Health Ministry's expert committee also observed that Coke and Pepsi were safe. CSE in turn criticized the expert committee's findings and said that 11 of the Coke and Pepsi drinks contained average pesticides levels that were 24 times higher than the limits agreed by the Indian government. Despite the health ministry's clean chit to the colas, several states continue to ban or restrict Coke and Pepsi. However, the pesticide controversy adversely affected the sales of both Coke and Pepsi as consumers started watching their diet more closely. Organic food products suddenly became popular as the healthier options were available to the people now. Organic food products are by means definition, organic means fruits, vegetables, food grains, and processed products that have been produced with no pesticides or inorganic fertilizers. Meanwhile, the soft drinks giants have been continuously advertising and trying to convince the consumers about the safety of their products. So, this Pepsi Cola controversy actually raises a very interesting question. Why are soft drink giants Coca Cola and PepsiCo putting in so much of effort on publicity campaigns in India after the decline in their sales? So, this, my dear, shows how the business environment affects any organization, how the people, how the entities, how the customers responding towards your product actually impact a business. Suddenly, one organization outside a company can bring down the sales of an organization in a fraction of seconds. So the answer lies in the fact that their success is dependent not merely on the internal management but also on several other external forces. As for example, the decisions and actions of the governments, the consumers, and some other firms, and even some non government organizations, as we call them, the NGOs like CSC and all. So, in this session, we will be identifying certain important external forces or the environmental factors and their impact on the operations of the business enterprises. So now let's move ahead and discuss first of all as to the main terminology of the session, what is business environment. The term business environment basically means the sum total of all individuals, institutions, and other forces that are outside the control of a business enterprise, but they may affect the performance of the business. So that is how we actually define the business environment. Talking about the business environment, as one writer has put it, just take the universe, subtract it from the subset that represents the organization, and the remainder is the environment. Thus, the economic, social, political, technological, and other forces which operate outside a business enterprise are a part of its environment. So all the individual consumers or the competing enterprises, as well as the government agencies, courts, media, any other enterprise which constitutes the suppliers, vendors, traders, all of them together formulate your business environment. The important point is that these individuals, institutions, and forces are likely to influence uh, the performance of the business enterprise, although they happen to exist outside its boundaries. For example, let's take an example here. Changes in any kind of government's economic policies, or maybe rapid technology developments outside your business environment, any kind of political uncertainty, or maybe any kind of changes in the taste or maybe fashion of the consumers, increased competition in the market. All these things influence the working of a business enterprise in very important ways. Increase in taxes by the government, can make things very expensive to buy. Sudden changes in the technology or technology improvements may make your technology very obsolete, and it brings a necessity in your business for innovating or maybe new technology adoption. So, changes in fashions may make you change the product, and, sometimes reduce your profit margins also to sell the product that is already in the market. So, these are, the multiple reasons why your business environment is so important. On the basis of the foregoing discussion, it can be said that your business environment has the following features. The first one being totality of the external forces. Business environment is basically the sum total of all the things external to the business firms, and as such is aggregative in nature. So this is what is meant by totality of external forces. The second being specific and general forces. Business environment basically includes both specific and general forces. Specific forces like the investors, customers, competitors, and suppliers. They all affect individual enterprises directly and immediately in their day-to-day working. General forces such as social, political, legal, and technological conditions have an impact on all business enterprises, and thus may affect an individual firm only indirectly. Next point is the interrelatedness. Different elements or maybe the parts of business environment are closely interrelated. For example, increased life expectancy of people and increased awareness for health health and healthcare, they have increased demand for many health products and services. Sometimes, products like fat-free cooking oil, cholesterol-free cooking oil, all these things are a reason when your customers are having health care in mind. So new health products and services have in turn changed people's lifestyles. So I hope I'm making it clear. Let's move on to the next point, which is dynamic nature. Business environment is always dynamic in nature, because it keeps on changing, whether in terms of technological improvements are concerned, any kind of shift in the consumer behavior or consumer preferences, any kind of new entrants entering your market and being a competition for you. So there is a lot of dynamicity in the business environment as far as the nature of the business environment is concerned. Next point is uncertainty. Business environment is largely uncertain, as it is very difficult to predict the future happenings, especially when the environment changes are taking place very frequently, as in case of the information technology or any kind of fashion industry is concerned. Similarly, there is another important feature of this business environment, which we called as complexity. Now, since the business environment consists of numerous interrelated and dynamic conditions, or maybe we can call them as forces, which arise from different sources, it becomes difficult to comprehend at once what exactly constitutes a given environment. In other words, the environment is a very complex phenomenon that is relatively easier to understand in parts, but difficult to grasp in its totality. For example, it may be very difficult to know the extent of the relative impact of the social, economical, political, technological, or legal factors on the change in the demand of a product in the market. So that is why it is very complex also, and it is uncertain also. And the last factor being relativity, the last feature being relativity. Business environment is a relative concept, since it differs from country to country and even region to region. Similarly, the political conditions in the USA, for instance, they differ from those in China or maybe in Pakistan. Similarly, the demand for maybe saris may be fairly high in India, whereas it may be totally non-existent in France. So this is what I mean by relativity. Now, just like the human beings, business enterprises, do not exist in isolation. So each business firm is not an island unto itself. It exists, survives, and grows within the context of the element and forces of its environment. So while an individual firm is able to do little to change or control these forces, it has no alternative but to respond and to adapt to the constantly occurring changes in the environment. So that is why the next point that I want to talk to you about is the importance of business environment. Yes, business environment is highly important because it enables the firm to identify the opportunities that are available in front of it. It also helps them in getting the first mover advantage if the organization is keenly responding to the changes in the environment. It also helps the firm to identify the threats and any kind of early warning signals, because if an organization is proactive enough and is constantly monitoring the changes that are occurring in the business environment, then what it can do is to analyze any kind of threat that is going to arise, and they can be proactive about it and respond to it very fast and keenly. The next is that it helps in tapping the useful resources. Why? Because you are aware of where you stand and what kind of environment is surrounding you. So, whatever resources are around you, you have a keen insight about them and you can easily utilize those resources very well. It also helps in coping up with different changes that are there in the environment, and an organization is since adapting with the environment constantly, it becomes easier for the organization to cope up with the changes as well. So, an environment doesn't only pose challenges in front of you, but it also makes you capable enough to meet those challenges and to respond to those challenges very easily. Next is that it helps in assisting in planning and policy formulation. Why? Because obviously your business environment is the one which is constantly changing, bringing out those changes. It is those environmental factors which are bringing in lots and lots of policy changes. Your economic environment brings around you the economic changes, changes in the economic conditions, and these are the reasons which actually make an organization also formulate corrective policies and sometimes adopt to the new policies according to the changes in the political, legal and economic changes in the environment. And last but not the least, it helps in improving the performance of an organization. With the changing environment, an organization always stays updated, and because an organization is always updated, it is more valuable for the customers, because customers are constantly demanding new and advanced versions of the product and features, and an organization can only be more proactive in providing or fulfilling the consumer demands and needs as far as these few mentioned things are concerned, only if it is staying updated with the environmental changes, with the dynamicity of the environment. So now let us move ahead and talk about what is a social environment. The social environment of a business basically includes all the social forces like the customs, the traditions, the values, the social trends, the society's expectations from the business, etc., etc. So the traditions, basically the tradition that I am following or my family or my generations have been following, are actually going to define the social practices that have lasted for decades or even for centuries. For example, the celebration of different festivals like Eid, Holi, Diwali, Christmas, Guru Parv in India, all these things provide a significant financial opportunity to the businesses to do business, because on these festivals people exchange gifts, people exchange sweets, people decorate their houses, they repaint it, they refurbish it, sometimes they buy new electronic goods, new cars, new automobiles on the shera. So there is so much of financial opportunities also associated with these. So let's move ahead and talk about what are values here. I mentioned the term values just now. So values basically refer to the concepts that a society holds in a very high esteem. Like if I am following a particular religion or I am following some particular customs, then I might be giving some extra value to my own beliefs and my own traditions and cultures that I have been following since a long time. So in India, of course, there is individual freedom, social justice, equality of opportunity, and we believe in national integration. We are not treating any particular caste with indifference. There is equality. We are democracy. And All these things are basically examples of major values which are cherished by all of us. So in business terms, these values basically translate into the freedom of choice in the market, and it is a business's responsibility towards the society, and towards the society, to serve everybody equally, and of course to have non discriminatory employment practices towards the employees who are working in your organization, or towards the other stakeholders who are associated with your business. Next is the social trends that I want to talk to you people about. Social trends basically present various opportunities and threats to the business enterprises. For example, the health and fitness trend these days has become extremely popular. We all are becoming health conscious. We believe in eating diet food, and eating low calorie food. We believe in going to gyms and all. uh, and we also have an inclination towards organic food, because we've started believing that the pesticides and the organic chemicals that are used by different farmers and different agriculture practitioners are really very hazardous to the health. So this has basically, these types of these are actually trends. This wasn't the case a decade back. So this is in fact has been developed since past 1 decade or so. So, this has created a lot of popular demand for products like organic food, diet soft drinks, gyms, bottled mineral water, food supplements. So this trend has, however, harmed the business in other industries like the dairy processing industries, tobacco industries, liquor industries, and all these things, because people are now becoming more health conscious, and they are moving away from any hazardous consumption of hazardous products. So now let's talk about what is economic environment in India. The economic environment in India consists of various macro level factors which are related to the means of production and distribution of wealth, which have an impact on the business and industry. Let's talk about a few of them. These would include the stage of economic development in the country, the economic structure in the form of mixed economy, which recognizes the role of both public and private sectors, and of course the economic policies of the government, including the industrial and monetary as well as the fiscal policies. So let's move ahead and talk about this in more detail. If we talk about economic planning basically includes all sorts of 5 year plans that are given by the government, the annual budgets which are given by the government and the finance ministers of India. So, any planning that is done in order to, plan the proper economic activities of a nation in order to achieve some targeted GDPs in future, and some targeted growth rates in future, is basically economic planning. Any 5 year plan which does not meet its targeted growth rate is actually considered to be a failure. There have been multiple 5 year plans which have not succeeded, in previous governments that we have seen. We have been witnessing 5 year plans ever since independence, ever since the government of Jawaharlal Nehru. We have had around 12 5-year plans. It was after Narendra Modi's government that these 5-year plans were brought to a stop, and rather they had started some another type of plans and plan of actions. We will be discussing that in the further sessions, of course. So the economic indices like the national income, distribution of income, rate and growth of the GNP, the per capita income, disposal personal income, rate of savings and investments, value of exports and imports, any kind of balance of payments, and so on. All these would include all the economic indices on which the Economic Planning Commission sits and decides upon its economic policies. Then, of course, there are a lot of infrastructural factors also, like the financial institutes are there, the banks are there, the modes of transportation, communication facilities, and so on. They also play a very important role in the economic conditions of the country while deciding the GDP of the country. So, if we talk about the previous era, let's have a look at what happened pre-independence. At the time of independence, the Indian economy was mainly agricultural. So, at the time of independence, the Indian economy was mainly agricultural and rural in character. About 70% of the working population was employed in agriculture, and more than 85% of the population was actually living in the rural areas and the suburbs. So production was basically carried out using irrational low productivity based technology. We did not have good technology, we did not have good per capita income, so the condition was really very bad at the time of independence. There was, of course, some other societal flaws. There were the people were still believing in old orthodox systems of sati pratha, child marriages. They were not educating the girls. There was female feticide, and of course there were a lot of communicable diseases which were widespread. There was a lot of mortality rates were very high. In fact, child mortality and female mortality at the time of delivering the babies, all these problems were there at the time of independence. So this social condition along with the economic condition of the country was really very poor. So, in order to solve the economic problems of our country, the government had taken several steps, including, the control by the state of certain industries, central planning, and of course, reduced importance of the private sector. The main objectives of India's development plans that were formulated were to initiate the rapid economic growth to raise, of course, the standard of living, which was the first matter of concern for everyone, and to reduce the unemployment and the poverty level which was there in the country. The second objective was to become self reliant and set up some strong industrial base with heavy emphasis on the heavy and basic industries also. The third objective was to reduce the inequalities of income as well as wealth. And the next objective was to adopt a social pattern of development which was based on equality. And this was also done to basically prevent the exploitation of one person by the other. Initially, there was a lot of exploitation of women in the families by the other male members and the senior members of the family. There was exploitation of the juniors by the owners of the employees by the owners of the organization. There was exploitation of the lower caste people by the higher caste people. So there were a lot of social ills also that were there, not only the economic ills or the financial ills which were hampering the living conditions of the country and the citizens of the country. So, as a part of the economic reforms, the government of India announced a new industrial policy in July 1991. The major broad features of this policy uh, were, as I mentioned on the screen, the government reduced the number of industries under compulsory licensing to six. Many of the industries were reserved for public sector under the earlier policy. They were de-reserved. The role of public sector was limited only to four industries of strategic importance, and they also carried out disinvestment, which is actually, which means the uh, disinvestment of many public sector industrial enterprises. Then, a policy towards the foreign capital was also liberalized. Initially, we were not having very liberal policies towards the export import. There were heavy duties on export import. Besides that, the FDIs were having lots of rules and regulations, and that is why we were not having a good foreign exchange reserve in our country. So, the share of foreign equity participation was increased, and in many activities, 100% FDI was actually permitted. Then, of course, automatic permission was now granted for technology agreements with foreign countries, and foreign investment promotion board was set up to actually promote and channelize the foreign investments in India. So this was actually done with an idea that slowly, with these liberal policies, we will have more, multinationals coming to the country. And in fact, after 91, we actually saw a lot of MNCs coming to the country, and the major economic revolution that took place, and the growth of GDP that took place was only after these MNCs came to the country. And a lot of, this also brought in a lot of social reforms also. So then we come to the next aspect, which is the liberalization. The economic reforms that were introduced were basically aimed at liberalizing the Indian business and industry from all unnecessary controls and restrictions. So this was basic idea of liberalization. Because of all that license, permit, and quota raj that existed, we were hesitant in entering into the business sector of India. We were not seeing good, healthy startups. The number of startups in India was very less, meager, and this was all because of all this, and because of monopolies existing in the country that time, and that is why MRTP was also introduced, which was the Monopolies Restrictive and Trade Practices Act. So later on, which was actually, Companies Act had come. Companies Commission of India was established. So liberalization was also done with the idea to bring in some major economic reforms in the country, and liberalization of the Indian industries had taken place with respect to, abolishing the licensing requirements in most of the industries, except a few shortlisted industries which were left. Then, of course, there was freedom in deciding the scale of business activities. That is, which means that no restrictions were there on expansion or contraction of business activities. A total removal of the restrictions on the movement of goods and services was implied. Then there was freedom in fixing the prices of goods and services, reduction in tax rates, and lifting of unnecessary controls over the economy was done. Then, of course, simplifying procedures for imports and exports, and of course, making it easier to attract the foreign capital and technology, to India. So all these were actually, brought in with along with the liberalization that was brought into India. And then came the privatization, the new set of economic reforms which were aimed at giving greater role to the private sector in the nation building process, and of course a reduced role to the public sector. So this was basically a reversal of the development strategy which was pursued so far by the Indian planners. So to achieve this, the government refined the role of the public sector in the new industrial policy of 1991, and they adopted the policy of planned disinvestments of the public sector, and they decided to refer the loss making and the sick enterprises to the Board of Industrial and Financial Reconstruction. The term disinvestments used here basically means transfer in the public sector enterprises towards the private sector. So it results in the dilution of the stake of government in the public enterprise. If there is dilution of government ownership beyond 51%, it would result in the transfer of ownership and management of the enterprise to the private sector. And then slowly we saw the era of globalization. Globalization, we all know what it actually means. It means the integration of various economies of the world, leading to the emergence of a cohesive global economy. Till 91, the government of India had followed a policy of strictly regulating the imports in value as well as the volumes terms. So these regulations were with respect to the licensing of imports, tariff restrictions, quantitative restrictions. So slowly, the new economic reforms aimed at trade liberalization, which were directed towards the import liberalization, export promotion through maybe rationalization of the tariff structure, and reforms with respect to the foreign exchange, so that the country does not remain isolated from the rest of the world. So, globalization basically involves an increased level of interaction and interdependence amongst the various nations of the global economy. Physical, geographical gap, or political boundaries no longer remain barriers for a business enterprise to serve a customer in a distant geographical market. This has been made possible by the rapid advancements in the technology and, of course, the liberal trade policies. So, through the policy of 1991, the government of India moved the country to this at globalization platform actually. So, let's have a small look at the impact of the government policy changes on business and industry. I will be very brief in this session since we are falling short of time. And then in the next session, we will continue with a detailed discussion of the impact of government policy changes on the business and the industry. So the major impact of government policy was, uh, the increase in the competition, because more and more industries were now coming in, more demanding customers because they were now being able to get products from different brands. So that is why the customer demand was increasing. Rapid changes in technological environment were occurring. There was a necessity for change for all the organization. There was a need for developing the human resource also now, because now the industries were entering with better advanced technology and better advanced functions and procedures and working methods. So advancedly developed human resource was also required. Similarly, there was this market orientation and there was this loss of budgetary support to the public sector, from the government, and now more privatization was occurring. And we now reach towards the almost the last topic of this session that I wanted to discuss, which is the socio-economic philosophy. This socio-economic word, this socio-economic philosophy actually studies the relation of the economics to the social values and the social responsibility. So, if we try to define the term socio-economic environment, a definition of this term would be that socio-economic environment refers to the combination of external social and economic conditions that influence the operation and performance of an organization. The socio-economic environment is part of the overall business environment. Socio-economic factors are the lifestyle components and measurements of both directly influence social privilege and levels of financial independence. Status, income, are also studied by different philosophers in terms of how they each affect human behaviors and circumstances. As lifestyle measurements, they are believed to be directly correlated to the patterns of drug use, food choices, prevalence, and rates of mortality in the human population. So, in our next session, we will be discussing details as to what are the major factors of this, how they impact, the business, how is in these technological and political and legal. So for discussion, you just begin with the quiz. Movement, B, written, B, understanding, B, the answer, B. Factors included socioeconomic environment are A, income, education, B, education, income, environment, B, age and income. So here is my next question. Factors included in socio-economic environment are age, income, education, education and income, education, income, environment, and D is age and income. The answer is C, education, income, and environment. Here's my next question. Dash refers to the combination of external social and economic conditions that influence the operation and performance of an organization. A. Economic environment. B. Social environment. Socio-economic environment. C. Political environment. D. None of these. The answer is B. Socio-economic environment. My next question is, which of the following is not a feature of business environment? A. Interrelatedness. B. Dynamic nature. C. Uncertainty. D. Ambiguity. The answer is D. Ambiguity. My next question is, the new industrial policy was launched in the year 1984, 1991, 1976, 1990. 1990. Answer is B. 1991. My next question is, the new socio-economic philosophy studies the relation of economics to social values or social responsibilities. C, both A and B. D, none of these. The answer is both A and B. So that is all from my side. We have discussed a lot about the business environment that is surrounding a business entity in India today, and how different factors and different elements of the business environment actually impact the business functioning. We've also studied in a great depth the importance of the business environment and how it, actually, makes a business environment survive in a particular country. And we discussed the different, we discussed initially the condition of India at the time of independence, and then post independence reforms, and the main important decisions that were made under the new economic and the new industrial policy that was brought in at the time of 1991. After this, we will be discussing this session in greater depth, and we will be covering some more details about the business environment. We will also be discussing the 5-year plans in India. We will be discussing about the companies uh, act that was brought in, and what were the main features of it, and how these different policies that were formulated by the government of India had supported the Indian business houses to grow and to groom in the nation. So that is all from my side. I hope that you have had a great deal of knowledgeable session um, in previous 40 or 45 minutes that we have had. This is Dr. Swati Mishra from International School of Business Management at Suresh Gyan Vihar University, signing off. Thank you so much.